Please join me in welcoming Maya Deeb.
Every day, we make so many choices. I'd like you all to make one now. It's a sunny day out, and there's someone on the ground, clearly in distress. You don't know them, but you can either offer to help, or you can keep walking. Let them figure things out themselves. Kind of like the trolley problem, but less murder. Last year, I broke nearly every bone in my foot in a losing fight against gravity. As I laid on the ground, crying in pain, I was only barely aware enough to clock that 3 people just walked past me without a second thought. When I realized nobody was going to stop to help me, my only choice left was to walk on my shattered foot to find help. Every step felt like hell. Now, nobody meant to harm me by walking away. They just didn't choose to help me. Today, I want to show that inaction is just as impactful as direct action, that inaction is not neutrality, and the power of planting small seeds. Our communities are being shaped through our inaction. I felt the pain of others' inaction and of my own. I learned gardens only grow where planted. Now, since I brought up the trolley problem, let's talk about it. Nowadays, the trolley problem is a utilitarian emblem, but it was never meant to boil down to the least number of people dead. Philippa Foot focused on the moral difference between killing and letting die. She wanted people to reckon with allowing 5 workers to die or doing the act of pulling a lever, actively choosing to kill a person. Which act is more regretful? Now, Aristotle addresses this in Nicomachean Ethics, making a distinction between voluntary and involuntary actions. He then presents cases where the lines are blurred between the two, or for us, whether it's done or allowed. Aristotle adds that you can neither say an act is voluntary or not if a person does something through ignorance but is not sorry. I had the chance to talk to Dr. Lynn Sargent about their article called Inaction is Action, and as part of that, we spoke about the age-old debate between doing and allowing. Now, what does it mean to do something? I don't know, but Dr. Sargent also asked me, is it our responsibility to positively act to reduce our ignorance? Plato adds in the Republic by stating that good men help, bad men harm. Good men can avoid causing harm, bad men will inevitably cause harm. Plato adds, though, that refraining from action does not mean one is virtuous, making clear that inaction isn't neutrality, it's neglect, complicity, and more. We face this every day, even in our relationships. Gary Chapman once said, "We all blossom when we feel loved and wither when we do not feel loved." But none of us have the keys to a secret garden, and we don't always get it right in our relationships. I mean, it's easy to feel isolated from the people closest to us. How often do you hear couples arguing over, "That's not what I meant"? I mean, I'm more than guilty of serving and receiving that one. But regardless of the intent, there wouldn't have been an argument without the impact of the hurt behind it. Tupac wrote a poem that I think captures the pain that everyone feels. Who do you know that stops that long to help another carry on? The world moves fast and would rather pass you by than to stop and see what makes you cry. It's painful and sad, and sometimes I cry, and no one cares about why. We can see how a lifetime of hurt stack up in a person by looking at PTSD. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk claims the body keeps the score. I can attest that's true. The body remembers, gardens remember too. Those of you that have tried to repot a root-bound plant, you know how hard it is to untangle. You're gonna break more than a few roots. The plant will live, but it's always gonna carry the scars of an altered root structure. The way it absorbs water and nutrients will always be different. Applying that to people, we know that PTSD is more than mental. As an outsider, you might not see the daily struggle to thrive, but we uprooted few must constantly act to overcome this. Despite this, there are effective treatments to help manage PTSD. Dr. van der Kolk found success in body-centric interventions such as reprocessing. Reprocessing isn't just a superficial act. It allows us to rewire our brains using neuroplasticity. Reprocessing enables patients to use their own tools to do the work of regaining autonomy over their pasts. Now, the way that neuroplasticity works is amazingly similar to seedlings. Dr. Eric Avery, an artist physician, taught me. His work has been featured at Harvard, Princeton, and my house. He has very graciously allowed me to use his piece, Neurogenesis, here. He explained to me that the prompt was creating art to heal the artist's trauma. And he further explained that if he didn't tend to his seedlings daily, they'd die, like inactive neurons being pruned off. And he explained that enriched childhood environments stimulate brain development, while childhood neglect deprives it. However, even one good mentor, he said, can often overcome the effect of this neglect. Knowing this is the result of one person's actions, isn't it a moral imperative to water our gardens? What does it really mean, or how much does it really cost to be present for the people in our lives? Now, I want to talk about my own gardens growing up. I moved a lot. It was hard for me to plant roots. I went to 6 high schools in 4 states in 4 years, and with every move, my life in gardens changed drastically. Born in Ohio, I found myself all over the country before I was 18. Starting in a claustrophobic gated community in Southwest Florida, where my grades and the double-flowering hibiscus were equally ambitious, to then, across the country, Seattle, where we were homeless. I watched the evergreens grow taller as I shrunk, ineligible to go to school because the homeless thing. And then we drove back across the country to Virginia Beach, where I would skip class, write about worms and dirt. And then finally, back to Ohio. My mom and I struggled to make ends meet here after my dad passed away. We drowned in bushels of apples from his favorite orchard. It's been an immense privilege to have experienced so many gardens in my life. My personal inaction, though, through most of this time, was self-sabotaging. I refused to act and called myself strategic for it. Someone once asked me how it was possible that in a school with over 3,000 people, nobody knew my name. I told them that I would rather feel the pain of loneliness than to feel the pain of befriending, loving, and then losing someone again. Again, I refused to act and thought I was strategic. As a result, I spent a lot of time alone in my room. To compensate, I helped online communities a bit. At age 25, I finally went back to Virginia Beach. I finally saw the beauty in the things that did manage to grow roots. After this, I continued helping with charities, including one that raised donations to build a school in Kenya. At the time, I wanted to be an astrophysicist more than anything. And this charity introduced me to an actual astrophysicist who taught me about making tiny changes to Earth. It took some time to sink in, but it helped me find some light in dark times. Dr. Avery correctly guessed that I had some master gardeners in my life. Now, earlier, I asked you all a question. Is it our responsibility to positively act to reduce our ignorance? If you thought yes, then you believe in positive rights. Positive and negative rights are colloquially accepted rights that deal with some of the weeds in our gardens. Negative rights are easy. They're rights against interference. Someone harasses you on the street, you have the right to an officer. It doesn't take much to justify that. Positive rights, however, they're often rights to aid or support, and they often have to be justified in capital. But I'm not here to talk about capital. That sounds like my actual nightmare. Instead, I want to talk about the ways we can support each other that don't cost anything, what we owe to each other, which then brings me to Peter Singer's thought experiment. To set the scene, it's a great day out, and there's a pond that you walk by daily on your way to work. The kids play in it all the time, but today, you notice a toddler all alone in the pond. They can't seem to keep their head out of the water. There's no caregiver in sight, and you know they'll drown without intervention. But there's a catch. While the pond is totally shallow, It's gonna ruin your shoes. Like, how do you even wash Pond's shoes? Do you have to get a new detergent for that? So what do? You save the damn kid. You might not see a drowning toddler every day, but you do have the capacity to create tiny changes to Earth. Remembering what Plato said, inaction is not neutrality. In this case, walking away kills the child. Is that doing or allowing anymore? Now, I'll pause to acknowledge that constantly acting isn't necessarily always in our best interest. It is possible to overwater our gardens, but like the blurred lines between action and inaction, it's really hard to know what the answer is. We worry that we'll be taken advantage of if we show vulnerability, or we'll be boastful if we talk about our wins. The politics of life are complicated and hard. But a perfect example of this is in Hong Kang's A Vegetarian. We see increasing signs of the main character's severe mental decline through snippets of her family members' perspective. We never experience the world through her lens. At one point, she whispers, "I was standing on my head, and leaves were growing from my body. Roots were growing from my hands, and so I dug on and on. I wanted flowers to bloom." As readers, we must reckon with the risks of allowing her personal autonomy, letting her flowers bloom. In the clinical setting, this issue affects psychiatric patients' rights to refusal. To question this like Dr. Sargent, why do we think allowing is worse than doing? It's not an easy answer, and it's not always going to be the same. Now, I'd like to argue that we don't shape our gardens through grand gestures, but rather tiny ones, making tiny changes to Earth. Social ecology argues that social and ecological disasters are inextricable, and that humans and nature were never meant to be at odds. Social ecology forces us to tend our gardens both literally and metaphorically. But what if acting's too hard? One study found that people don't volunteer simply because nobody asked them. Another found that people don't volunteer simply because they felt the roles weren't meaningful enough. So we need to stop waiting to be asked. We need to plant the seeds to learn and do and help our communities. I was surprised when I learned how many roles there were to fill. Organizers, writers, designers. Not every cause has the resources to be recruiters too, though. Now, I am not perfect. Definitely not. I am not nice all the time. I yell when I'm mad. I neglect relationships, and I'm definitely not perfect at considering the impact of my actions. But regardless of how today went, tomorrow the sun will rise again, and so must we get up to tend our gardens again. To steal a line from Skyrim, what is better, to be born good or to overcome one's evil blood with mighty effort? Even if we never become perfect, it's worth trying. Dr. Avery told me that change in gardens and brains is slow, and I think that's okay. I think about my mom's stories about my great-grandfather a lot. His name was Octaviano. He was homeless and illiterate. My great-grandmother, Petronila, took the time to teach him to read and write. It took time for him to bloom, but eventually he went on to graduate as an architect. His name can still be found on the buildings he designed. Now, I have one last story. I want to revisit my foot injury, and I'd like you all to consider the intent versus impact and what was done versus allowed. So at the time, I was recovering from my foot injury, but not just that, but I'd had 4 critical surgeries in just a few months. At the time, I worked on the 2nd floor of a building, and I was non-weight bearing, so I really needed the elevator. So imagine my panic when one day I was informed that the elevator was broken. I called my supervisor. I told them I didn't have a safe way to get down. They never responded, though. They're busted. They apologized for the inconvenience. At the end of the day, I called again, but my supervisor and everyone else in the building had already left. I was stranded alone on the 2nd floor of my building. Losing the autonomy to freely leave a building is terrifying, and I'm not alone or special in that. I called HR, I called the police, but ultimately I had to slide down 2 flights of stairs on my butt. It was humiliating. This event had a crippling impact on me. I convinced myself that I was a monster. I mean, good people don't get abandoned, right? I was hospitalized for suicidal ideation. The things that I remember most are my friends and ex-husband by my side, the nurses taking time out of their routines to listen to me cry, and the effort my family put in to see me every day. While in the hospital, I thought about my older brother, Master Sergeant Walter Lewis Deeb. He took his own life in January 2018, leaving behind his 3 children and 4 siblings. I find myself wondering if people had acted more, if he had acted more, if I had acted more, would he still be alive? I don't know. When I left the hospital, I also left that job. Per Orwell, the plant is blind and stupid, but it knows enough to keep pushing upwards toward the light. My great-grandfather kept pushing towards the light, and I want to as well. I know I've left you guys with a lot today, but I hope if I've left you with anything, it's that you'll choose to banish evil blood, save the drowning child, and act in service of radical kindness. I'd like to end with a quote: "Where flowers bloom, so does hope." But thank you.